Hi everyone, Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, here with another This Week in NYRA Bets video. But before we get into all of the great content we have coming up for you this week in terms of promotions, as well as race previews and other handicapping and betting videos, want to make sure to remind you all to press that like button and subscribe to the NYRA Bets YouTube channel if you've not done so already. We have a lot of great content on here. We're a lot more than just New York racing. We're going to be covering parks. We're going to be covering a lot of other tracks throughout the fall and into the winter, whether that's Keeneland, whether that's obviously Del Mar for the Breeders' Cup, Gulfstream Park in the championship meet, Tampa Bay Downs, all of the great Derby prep circuits that we have from Fairgrounds to Oaklawn Park, everything in between. So want to make sure to press that subscribe button so you can get all of the best handicapping and betting information right here on NYRA Bets. All right. Well, listen, this was an exciting week of racing, and we're going to talk about some of those great races we saw last weekend. And we're also going to talk about some of the exciting races we're going to see coming up this coming weekend across the country. But let's talk a little bit about the promotions that we have coming up here on NYRA Bets this week. And let's kick things off on Thursday, September 19th. We got a $5,000 hit and split promotion on the Race 1 trifecta at Churchill Downs. That's right. If you play the trifecta in Race 1 at Churchill Downs, opt in on Thursday night, $5,000 hit and split. Meaning, if you hit that Race 1 trifecta, you get to split an additional $5,000 with everyone else who opted in on NYRA Bets. This can add hundreds, potentially thousands of dollars to an already great win trifecta in that particular race. So listen, it is a no-brainer promotion. Want to make sure to opt in and play today. Friday, September 20th, we got a $20 bonus when you bet at least 75 at both Belmont at the Big A and Woodbine. So if you bet 75 at each of those tracks, you get $20 back, win or lose. You can't beat it. The next day, we come right back with a $100 bankroll builder for the Breeders' Cup. And this is something we have 5 consecutive weeks of doing this promo. And if you opted in every week, you will get $100 for that Belmont, or for that Breeders' Cup, I should say, weekend. Now, on Saturday, the Breeders' Cup bankroll builder race is the cotillion. Listen, Torpedo Anna is your overwhelming favorite. This might not be a bad way of making that win bet a little bit richer if you like Torpedo Anna in that race, and I think a lot of people do. But here's the deal. You put $50 to win on a horse. If that horse wins or loses, you still get $20 back. So if you love Torpedo Anna, think of it as you get an extra $20 added to your win bet. That's not a bad deal. So you may not get 4 to 5 odds on her, but this will maybe help you get a little bit better of odds on her with that $50 win bet. So again, $50 to win in the cotillion on a horse, and you automatically are going to get $20 back, win or lose. You opt in every week. And again, win or lose, you're going to get that $100 by the time those 5 weeks are over. Now on Sunday, we have a nice little promo. I'm going to be driving back from Parks that day. And on September 22nd, you get a 20% exacta boost at all exactas at Belmont at the Big A. So if you're playing exactas, you get that 20% boost. Listen, I know a lot of bettors would say, well, there's the takeout. Right. Essentially, think of it this way. There's no takeout basically on that exacta, and you're getting a little bit on top of that. That's another way of thinking about it in terms of that exacta boost, because there are takeouts on all different types of wagers. But this way, you're basically eliminating the exacta takeout, and you're still getting a little bit more on top of that. So it's a really good bet if you like playing vertically and like playing exactas on Sunday at Belmont at the Big A. And then Monday, September 23rd, how do you like free money? Is that something you enjoy? Well, here's the deal. We're going to give you free money, a 25% deposit bonus, as long as you use express funding. So if you deposit at least $20 in your NYRA Bets account, you'll get 25% back on your deposit bonus. So if you put $20 in, you're going to get $5 back just for using the express funding function. So it's a great way to, if you're already going to put 20 bucks in for betting throughout the week, use that express funding option and you get an extra 5. So listen, that's just free money sitting out there for you. So make sure to opt into all these great promotions today. Now, in terms of upcoming content that we have this week, man, there's a lot. We already have a great video up. I was joined by my colleague at NYRA Bets, Kaylee Shapiro. We did an early reaction to the Pennsylvania Derby and the Cotillion Stakes. We talked about both of those fields. We discussed who we like, why we like those horses, where to look for value in those different races, and in particular with the Cotillion, where to maybe look for value in exactas, trifectas, more vertically. In the Pennsylvania Derby, we really talked a lot about where can you find maybe an alternative to Dragoon Guard? Where can you find an alternative to Stronghold, who I feel like is marooned out in that number 11 post? So we really did talk a lot about this from a betting standpoint. So make sure to check out that video. It's only about 15 minutes long. Kaylee and I talk about those fields and provide you a little bit of analysis. Now, we have a lot more coming up for the Pennsylvania Derby this week. Going to have my full episode of Capping the Card. And if you tuned in last week to Churchill Downs, hey, we did pretty good at Churchill, actually. We had 4 top pick winners and a flat bet ROI of $2.70. So if you had just put $2 to win on all of my top picks, you would have gotten $2.70 back by the end of the day on average. So, 35% increase. So that's pretty good. And we also had the winner in both the Pocahontas and the Iroquois. So that was exciting. Good day there at Churchill. Hope we can replicate that, have another good day, maybe even a better day at Pennsylvania Derby Day down at Parks. So going to make sure to check that out as I give you my top pick, my top value play for every race on the card. All 14, if I'm not mistaken. Cotillion Stakes preview. We're going to be joined by Jessica Paquette. Jess and I are going to talk about that race. And here's the thing. What I love about this Cotillion is, yes, there's Torpedo Anna. But if you look past Torpedo Anna, it's a really interesting race. And it's a fascinating race if you think everybody's running for second, because I think that also gives you some interesting views into how to think about betting this race from a vertical standpoint. And if you really think maybe Torpedo Anna bounces off that last huge effort, then maybe there's a really nice alternative that you can find, obviously, what's going to be a huge price. Now, here's the other thing. We're going to be down at Parks for Pennsylvania Derby Day. Myself, Kaylee Shapiro, obviously over on the NYRA side, you're going to have Maggie Wolfendale down there. You're going to have Lafitte Pinkai down there. So we're going to have a lot of presence down there at Parks for Pennsylvania Derby Day. Come up, say hi. I'd love to chat with you if you're on the premises. I know a lot of my good friends are always there. Every year, I got to shout out to my buddies, the East Coast horse players, Len, Mark, and Greg. Those guys are always a lot of fun. We hang out every year there. So going to be a lot of fun. And we're going to be doing a lot of coverage from down there as well. A lot of live on-site reporting throughout the day. So make sure to tune in. Make sure to follow us on X at NYRA Bets or myself at Failed to Menace. We also have a lot of great Breeders' Cup content coming up in terms of race previews, in terms of looking back at some historical stuff, in terms of getting you ready for prepped for the Japanese coming over, prepped for the Europeans coming over, prepped for who's Todd Pletcher getting ready, who's Chad Brown getting ready, who's Steve Asmussen getting ready, who's Bob Baffert getting ready, really doing comprehensive barn tours in some ways and really doing some deep dives, not only into who they're getting ready, but what has been their general level of success in these races. I think there's some statistics that are really going to surprise you quite a bit when we dive into that stuff. So always a lot of fun to get ready for the Breeders' Cup, all those great races over 2 days at Del Mar. And I'll actually be out there at Del Mar. I've never been there before. My dad, shout out to my dad, his birthday was yesterday. He went to law school out of Pepperdine University. He always tells me about going to the track. He never tells me about law school, but he tells me about going to the old Hollywood Park and Santa Anita and Del Mar. And, I've never been out there, though, so I can't wait to get out there for the Breeders' Cup. For those of you who are listening from out in California, hope to see some of you out there. And if you're traveling out for the Breeders' Cup, love to see you out there as well. Well, listen, that's kind of some of the promotions and the content that we have coming up this week. But, it was an interesting week because we had our first Kentucky Derby and Kentucky Oaks prep races in the form of the Iroquois and the Pocahontas. And we'll start with the Pocahontas, which was won by Lucara, who was a Mark Casse trainee. And one of the things I mentioned was Mark Casse's got a lot of really good 2-year-olds, and we saw that at Saratoga. And I think that's one of the through lines that we saw maybe through that first week of very early Oaks and Derby prep races, is that those Saratoga maiden specialweight races came back pretty strong. That both Jonathan's Way, who won the Iroquois, and Lucara, who won the Pocahontas, both came out of maiden specialweight races at Saratoga. Some of those horses coming out of the Ellis Park maiden specialweight races maybe didn't run quite as well. So, not saying the balance of powers in New York, but just saying that there's obviously people are going to be drawn to running their best horses at Saratoga a lot of times. And you've seen those races come back strong. Now, what's interesting about Lucara, I thought it was a very good effort, very professional effort. You know, she really sat mid-pack with Ricardo Santana Jr. aboard. She had one gate to wire last time out, and it showed some ability to maybe pass horses, but not the way she did on Saturday. And I thought that was really impressive that she was able to do that. Now, the speed figure for Beyer came back very slow. And again, Beyer's just one of many. A lot of people look at the rags. A lot of people look at Thorograph. A lot of people look at Timeform US and Brisnet and other speed figures. And some people don't use speed figures at all, but it's one metric. And she had broken her maiden at Saratoga running an 84 Beyer speed figure. She comes back with a 71. So, and what I would just say is, in general, this 2-year-old fillies division, this juvenile fillies division, man, it feels wide open. It just doesn't feel like we have some monsters like we have maybe in the past. And it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out because, like I said, some of the speed figures really aren't that overwhelming, though. You could go back to last year and you could look at a horse like Just FYI, who ended up winning that Breeders' Cup juvenile fillies, and she didn't necessarily have the most overwhelming Beyer speed figures either going into this. So I think we're going to learn a lot in races like the Alcibiades coming up at Keeneland later this fall. And, you know, obviously looking out west at who Bob Baffert has and some other trainers in terms of their big horses that they have potentially getting ready for that race. Now, Jonathan's Way, listen, I'm not wearing my hat today, but the good news is if you watch Capping the Cards, you know that I said that I was going to eat my hat if Jonathan's Way was 9-2. Well, the good news is the reason I'm not wearing my hat today is not because I had to eat my hat. It's just because it's at work right now. And I ultimately was right about that. Jonathan's Way went off as your 6-5 favorite. That's right. It turns out maybe the races at Saratoga are important. And he was so impressive in that debut where, like I said, he got pinched back and then circled the field. And this time, completely different way to win. Going a mile, stretching out, and just got out to the front end and just said, see you later. And Owen Almighty ran a really nice race for a second, had a little bit of a troubled trip. I didn't think it was that bad of a trip. I thought some people online were kind of overstating how bad that trip might have been or how much it might have affected him. But Owen Almighty, very good horse. All credit to that horse for finishing second in that race. But Jonathan's Way, the real deal. This horse came back, earned an 89 Beyer speed figure. Certainly puts him right there with some of the upper echelon in that 2-year-old male division for going into the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. So, he looked like he was getting stronger as the race was going on. And really credit to Phil Bauer, too. And I thought Caitlin Free down at Churchill did a really nice job interviewing him afterwards. And he talked a lot about how, he had been working with a lot of fillies to this point. And when you're a smaller operation, that's kind of how you have to get your start. And this is really his first big colt that he's been able to cultivate in his barn. And it looks like it's going to be a really good one. So happy for Phil and excited to see how this one continues to turn out. And he had a really great summer up at Saratoga as well. So not surprising to see his continued success there at Churchill in the Iroquois. Now, up here in New York, we had a couple of interesting races, in particular, Lorraise, who won the Winter Memories. That was a really impressive effort. And that was a race where I wasn't necessarily sold on some of the top choices in that race. And this is a prime example of a race where I didn't do a video or I didn't do any written analysis for it, but I had obviously handicapped the race. And I thought to myself, well, geez, Lorraise isn't going to be 6-1. So I don't know if that horse is going to end up being a good bet. I assume the horse would get bet down to like 7-2 or something like that. And I look up right before post, and the horse is 7-1. And I, of course, pull out my NYRA Bets app, and I go, yeah, we're going to put $20 down on this horse, or 25, I think I put down. And it's 7-1. And that horse, first time North American debut for Christophe Clement, and that horse got a very typical ride for Joel Rosario, inside, coming from off the pace. And what a great turn of foot that horse had to win that Winter Memories. That was a really exciting finish. And actually ran a lot better than Beautiful Love, who ran the next day in the Jockey Club Oaks, who ran, if I'm not mistaken, a 4 Beyer point speed or 6 Beyer point speed figures lower. So Lorraine's earned a 90, and Beautiful Love for Charlie Appleby earned a 84. So interesting to just kind of see that Jockey Club Oaks Invitational. I was not, again, that was not an overwhelming field to me. I was admittedly playing against Beautiful Love in that spot, and I was a little perplexed by how Mont Saint Michel got shuffled so far back, and I thought that horse would be a lot more forward, and just didn't get the right sort of trip. Ended up finishing 4th, but that was a horse that was really dead on the board too. I thought outran the expectations from a betting standpoint, but obviously just didn't quite get the right sort of trip. Now, you want to talk about trips. I got to talk about this race before I sign off, and that is the EP Taylor up at Woodbine. And listen, if you watched Jeff Bratt and I analyze the 4 Grade 1 races on NYRA Bets YouTube, you got a 13-1 winner and a 16-1 winner from the two of us. So listen, we did our job. And so Jeff and I were texting back and forth after the race. He goes, "Hey, we turned out pretty good this week." I said, "Yeah, we look like pretty smart in our analysis." So it was a really exciting day of racing up there. But I got to talk about the EP Taylor, because this was a race stocked full of talent. You know, you had Moira, you had Fev Rover, and you had Blue Rosen. And the question was, is Blue Rosen going to be the same Blue Rosen that we saw last year? And the answer was no. And you also lost any value on Blue Rosen. Part of that was Cinderella's Dream scratched, and so a lot of the other money went to Blue Rosen. But on top of that, I mean, this horse opened at 9-5 from an 8-1 morning line, so you knew it wasn't going to happen. And I didn't like her at that price, that low of a price, certainly. But I got to give a ton of credit to Kazushi Kimura, because you know what he did? He was aggressive. And you know what I like? I like jockeys who are aggressive. And on Full Count Felicia, he just basically said, pace. And he just opened up about 15 lengths on that field and said, you nerds, go back and do your typical horse racing on the turf, where you sit there and try to carve out 52-second half-mile fractions. I got a horse that likes to run. You know what I'm going to do? Shocking development. I'm going to let her run. And oh my God, look what happens when you let a speed horse run. They open up, they get comfortable, and she ended up pulling off the upset, gate to wire. And great ride by Kazushi. Huge credit to him for that ride. And we saw that in a couple of races at Belmont at the Big A this opening weekend as well. Gate to wire winners going 2 turns on the turf. Kendrick Carmouche was on one of those as well. Use speed. I get so frustrated sometimes when I see horses being strangled back to these incredibly slow early fractions. If you have a horse that has an advantage over the rest of the field, use it. Use it. And use it and open up on these horses. I mean, we saw so many races, big races at times, being stolen on the front end up at Saratoga. Now we just saw it at Woodbine. We've seen it a couple of instances at Belmont at the Big A. Again, if you're riding along on the turf, if you're an aggressive jockey, I'm always going to really appreciate that. And even if Kazushi hadn't been able to get the win there, hey, at least he's letting the horse give herself the best chance. And I always think of that with Kendrick as well. He puts his horses in a position to win, and he puts them out there. They're not going to get in trouble. They're not going to get a bad trip. They're going to be up front, and they're going to be in a position to at least show if they're good enough. Now, they might not be, but they're not going to be hemmed inside, having to be steady back all the time, and then having to kick out 6 wide and making some turn for home, tracking 52-second to the half fractions. So I just get so frustrated when I see those types of rides. And so when I see one like what Kazushi did on Full Count Felicia, hey, full credit to him. That was an awesome ride and a great performance by that horse. So credit the other Kevin Attard horse. Of course, Moira was the favorite in that race that also trained by Attard. He had the top 2 horses. He had the Exacta and the EP Taylor. So really cool stuff to see. And really, like I said, great overall weekend of racing. And we got a great weekend of racing coming up at Parks, Pennsylvania Derby. Like I said, we already got the early reaction up, so make sure to check that out. And we're going to have a lot of other content for you. We got Next running this weekend in the Greenwood Cup. Is he going to win by more than 20 lengths, less than 20 lengths? We'll have to see. I mean, he's a dominant horse. I can't wait to watch him run. That's going to be a lot of fun to see. But listen, really appreciate everybody checking this out, watching NYRA Bets YouTube. So make sure to press that like and subscribe button today. Well, friends, for Matthew DeSantis, I'm going to wish you a great and profitable day at the races and remind you, it's now post time.